This successful billionaire, known for never missing a meeting and always working late, decided to return home earlier than usual one quiet afternoon. He expected to find an empty house, maybe some silence, maybe his staff cleaning. But instead, the moment he stepped inside, what he saw completely froze him in place. He turned pale, unable to speak, and everything in his life began to change from that moment on. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Michael came home earlier than usual that day. He was tired from a long meeting and just wanted to relax. But something unusual caught his attention as he opened the front door. In the living room, he saw his 4-year-old son Matthew, who had been struggling with mobility, standing on crutches. Matthew was carefully wiping the floor with a cloth in one hand, trying to balance himself. Right next to him was Sarah, the housemaid, kneeling and guiding him gently, showing him where to clean and how to move safely. It wasn't just a cleaning activity. It felt more like a small therapy session. Michael stayed silent for a few seconds, watching the two interact. Matthew looked happy and focused, and Sarah was encouraging without being too serious. It was a strange but touching moment for Michael. He hadn't expected to see his son so engaged in something active. For the first time in weeks, Michael noticed real improvement in Matthew's movements. That simple moment changed the entire mood of the house for Michael. He decided to understand what had been happening while he was away. After a while, Michael approached Sarah to ask what was going on. She seemed a little nervous when he questioned her about the cleaning activity with Matthew. Sarah explained in a quiet voice that she had started doing simple physical exercises with the boy during her free time. She didn't mean to overstep, she said. She just saw that Matthew had potential to get stronger if he moved a bit more every day. She described how she had been showing him how to balance, stretch his legs, and even use his crutches better. At first, it was only small movements, but slowly, Matthew became more comfortable and confident. Michael listened carefully, processing everything. Sarah was just the housemaid. No one expected her to take on anything more. Still, she had done this without asking, and somehow it was working. Michael asked her why she was doing it, why she cared so much. She hesitated at first, but then shared a personal story. Her reason wasn't professional. It was something from her own past. Sarah explained that her younger brother had been born with a disability. Growing up, she had taken care of him every day. She had learned how to help him move, how to motivate him, and how to deal with the emotional part of it all. When she saw Matthew struggling, it reminded her of her brother. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. It wasn't about earning praise or getting recognition. She genuinely cared. She saw a little boy who needed support, and she decided to offer what she knew. Michael was surprised. He had never heard this part of her life before. Sarah always kept things professional, never mixing her personal experiences with her work. But now, he saw a different side of her, someone who had depth, who carried heavy memories, and who still chose to help. It gave him a new respect for her, one that went beyond her job title. He realized that she'd been making a difference in his son's life in a way no one else had. Matthew's progress was becoming clearer. Sarah said that he was now eager to get out of bed every morning. He looked forward to their little sessions, whether it was wiping the floor, reaching for things on shelves, or walking across the room. He was learning without realizing he was in a form of physical therapy. For him, it was a fun routine with someone he trusted. Sarah kept it light and playful, never forcing anything, and that made all the difference. Michael began to see how important this routine had become to his son. He saw how Matthew's eyes lit up when he saw Sarah. He wasn't just looking at her as a helper in the house. He saw her as a true friend, someone who believed in him. Michael hadn't managed to find a physical therapist that Matthew liked. They always felt too formal, too distant. But Sarah had managed to do what they couldn't. She had made healing feel natural. Michael felt a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and even guilt for not noticing sooner. Michael also realized how much trust had been built between Sarah and Matthew. During dinner that evening, he watched how the boy turned to Sarah with little stories and smiles. He asked her if they could play their walking game again tomorrow. Sarah nodded with a gentle laugh, promising him they would. Michael didn't interrupt. He just listened. He knew now that her presence was valuable not just as staff, but as someone playing a meaningful role in his son's emotional and physical development. He asked Sarah more about her past, how she helped her brother, what kind of activities worked, what challenges she had faced. Her answers were practical, honest, and filled with small insights. She didn't exaggerate anything, and she never tried to sound like an expert. She was just someone with lived experience. That night, Michael stayed up thinking. He started to see that progress doesn't always come from professionals. It can come from people who simply care enough to try every single day. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He invited Sarah for a short conversation in the kitchen before she started her usual chores. He thanked her for what she had done and told her that he wanted to officially involve her in Matthew's care, not as a therapist, but as someone whose presence clearly made a difference. Sarah looked surprised and a little overwhelmed. She had never been officially asked to do this. She admitted that she was scared at first, worried that Michael might think she was interfering too much, but now, hearing his support, she felt encouraged. Michael said they would look into more resources if she needed help or ideas, but he trusted her judgment. Matthew entered the kitchen at that moment, balancing on his crutches. He walked straight to Sarah and hugged her. Michael saw it all: the trust, the bond, and the progress. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. He now understood how something unexpected could bring about the change he had been searching for all along. Michael sat down at the kitchen table with Sarah the next morning, a cup of coffee in his hand. The house was quiet, except for some faint noise from Matthew's room. He had asked Sarah to talk privately before starting her chores. She looked a little confused, but sat across from him. Michael started the conversation slowly, saying he had been thinking a lot since what he saw the previous day. Matthew helping her clean, using the crutches better than ever. He admitted he hadn't been paying enough attention to his son and wanted to understand more. Sarah hesitated, unsure how honest she could be, but Michael insisted, saying he needed the truth. That's when Sarah gently explained how lonely Matthew had been. Most of the time, the boy stayed in his room or watched TV alone. Grace, Michael's wife, barely interacted with him unless absolutely necessary. Michael's busy schedule had kept him away too. Matthew didn't complain, but Sarah could see the sadness in his eyes. Her words hit Michael hard. He realized he had been missing too much. Michael leaned back in his chair, shocked at everything he was hearing. He had always believed he was providing the best for his family, working long hours, building a strong business and paying for everything they needed. But now he saw that money couldn't replace time, presence, or care. He asked more about Grace, hoping Sarah was wrong. Sarah looked down and said that Grace often left Matthew with a TV or a tablet, barely speaking to him. She was rarely home during the day, and when she was, she acted more like a guest than a mother. Michael didn't know how to respond. He asked why Sarah had taken it upon herself to fill that gap. She said she simply couldn't ignore what she saw. Michael then asked about her past and how she got into this work. That led to another surprise. Sarah told him that she never finished college. She had plenty of hands-on experience, but no official degree. She worked because she needed to, not because she had many choices. Sarah shared that she had to support her mother and younger brother back home. Her brother still needed care, and her mother was getting older. She took any honest job that helped her send money back. She said she had always wanted to study therapy or nursing, but she couldn't afford the time or money. Despite that, she learned by doing. Every job gave her new experience, and helping Matthew reminded her why she wanted to work in care in the first place. She said she wasn't a professional, but she cared deeply. Michael was quiet for a while. He was impressed with her honesty and moved by her story. It wasn't easy to keep a family running on limited income and still give so much to others. Her dedication wasn't just for Matthew, it was who she was. He thanked her again, more seriously this time. He had misjudged her, thinking of her only as staff. Now he saw that she had given Matthew more than anyone else in the house. Later that day, Michael made a decision. He wanted to see for himself how these exercises worked and how Matthew responded. So, he told Sarah that he would wake up early the next morning to join them. She seemed surprised, but agreed. When morning came, Michael was already in the living room before Sarah and Matthew arrived. He watched as Sarah gently helped the boy stand with his crutches. She encouraged him to walk from one side of the room to the other, stopping to stretch and rest in between. Matthew smiled when he saw his dad watching. At first, he looked shy, but Sarah whispered something that made him laugh, and he continued. Michael noticed how patient she was, never rushing or scolding. She clapped when Matthew took extra steps. Michael could also see how much Matthew trusted her. The boy's movements were slow but steady, and every little improvement mattered. Watching them, Michael felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about physical progress, it was about attention, encouragement, and care. After the session ended, Michael picked Matthew up and sat with him on the couch. They talked, something they hadn't done properly in weeks. Matthew told him how Sarah made everything fun and how he liked their morning games. Michael asked if he could join next time, and Matthew nodded happily. For the first time, Michael felt like he was doing something right as a father. He didn't need to fix everything in one day, but he could be there, one morning at a time. He looked at Sarah, who had already started tidying up without saying much. He told her directly that he wanted to include her more formally in Matthew's care, even if she didn't have a degree. Her experience and dedication were enough. He also said they would look into training programs or online courses if she was interested. Sarah looked surprised and grateful. Michael felt a kind of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't just reacting to problems anymore. He was starting to make changes. In the days that followed, Michael adjusted his schedule. He started working from home 2 days a week and made time every morning to watch or participate in Matthew's exercises. He and Sarah discussed new goals for Matthew and tracked small improvements together. Grace noticed the changes, but remained distant. Michael didn't confront her immediately. He wanted to understand things more deeply before making any decisions. His focus, for now, was on Matthew. Every morning, the boy looked forward to the routine. His walking improved, and so did his mood. Michael felt a stronger connection with his son, and for once, it didn't feel forced. He also began to appreciate Sarah more, not just as a helper in the house, but as someone who had stepped in when no one else did. He respected her story, her reasons, and her steady approach. He realized that the truth about his home life had always been there. He just wasn't paying attention. Now that he saw it clearly, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to do better. Michael woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was still dark, and the house was quiet. He got dressed and went straight to the living room, where the morning routine with Matthew usually happened. He didn't want to miss anything. A few minutes later, Sarah entered, helping Matthew walk slowly with his crutches. The boy looked excited, but still a little sleepy. When he saw Michael waiting, he smiled. Michael smiled back and said, "I'm joining you today." Sarah nodded and asked Matthew to start with some gentle stretches. Michael sat nearby, watching carefully as she guided his son. She showed Matthew how to lift his legs one by one, how to move his arms slowly in circles, and how to breathe in and out calmly. Michael was impressed by how clear and confident Sarah was in her instructions. She didn't just give orders. She explained everything in a way that made sense. Matthew followed her carefully, sometimes losing balance, but always trying again. Michael stayed quiet, noticing every detail, every little effort. As the session continued, Sarah moved to the next part, simple standing exercises. She positioned a chair nearby just in case Matthew lost his balance. She helped him stand without the crutches and encouraged him to hold onto the back of the chair for support. Michael held his breath. He had never seen his son try something like this. Sarah told Matthew to count slowly while standing. 1, 2, 3. Matthew's legs trembled a bit, but he stayed up. Michael could see the effort on his son's face. He was sweating and focused. At around 10 seconds, Matthew started to lose balance, and Sarah gently helped him sit down. She smiled and clapped softly. "That's very good, Matthew. Let's try again." They repeated the process a few more times. Michael was amazed by how patient and supportive Sarah was. She never sounded frustrated. She always found a way to encourage. Even when Matthew struggled, she treated every try like progress. It was a side of her that Michael deeply respected now. Then came the moment that stayed in Michael's mind for the rest of the day. Sarah looked at Matthew and said, "Now let's go for 30 seconds. You're ready." Matthew looked unsure, but he nodded. She stood close, ready to catch him if needed. Matthew stood without the crutches. His legs were shaking slightly, but he stood tall. Michael counted in his head, quietly. The seconds passed. 10, 15, 20. Michael was gripping the armrest of the chair he was sitting in. At 25 seconds, Matthew's knees bent slightly, but he straightened up again. "Almost there," Sarah said calmly. "Keep going." When they reached 30 seconds, she gently said, "You did it." Matthew smiled, proud and tired. Michael couldn't hold back his emotions. He clapped loudly and stood up. He walked over to his son and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," he said. Matthew looked up and said, "I wanted you to see." That simple sentence hit Michael hard. It was honest and pure. He had missed so many moments like this before. After the hug, Sarah gave Matthew some water and let him rest. Michael sat back down, still trying to process everything he had just seen. He kept thinking about the determination on Matthew's face. His son wasn't just following instructions, he was fighting for every second he stood. That strength didn't come from nowhere. It came from someone believing in him daily, and that someone had been Sarah. She didn't treat Matthew like a sick child. She treated him like someone capable of progress. Michael finally understood the value of consistency and presence. It wasn't about big gestures or expensive therapists. Sometimes it was about being there, giving time, offering encouragement. Sarah had done all of that. Michael felt grateful, but also guilty for not doing it sooner. He turned to Sarah and said, "I want to be part of this. Every day. Not just today." She nodded, but didn't say much. Her small smile said enough. She was glad he had finally understood. It wasn't about replacing her, but joining the effort. From that day forward, Michael's mornings changed. He adjusted his schedule so he could be home for Matthew's routine. He even started setting an alarm earlier so he wouldn't be late or tired during the session. Each day, he learned more. How the exercises worked, how to guide without pushing too hard, how to help Matthew stay calm when he got frustrated. Sometimes he helped with the stretching, other times he just sat close, cheering Matthew on. Slowly, his relationship with his son started to grow. They began talking more, not just during exercises, but throughout the day. Matthew started asking questions about his dad's work. Michael started showing more interest in what Matthew was watching, reading, or playing. These small things began building a stronger bond between them. Sarah kept leading the sessions, but now it felt like a team effort. Michael wasn't just watching anymore. He was part of the process. The gap that had formed between him and his son over the years was beginning to close, one morning at a time. That morning, the three of them, Michael, Matthew, and Sarah shared a short moment of celebration. Matthew had achieved something important, and they had witnessed it together. It wasn't just about standing for 30 seconds. It was about being supported, encouraged, and seen. Michael looked at Sarah and gave her a respectful nod. He was no longer just the boss of the house. He was a father who had missed too much and now wanted to change. The joy on Matthew's face said everything. He felt proud, strong, and loved. Michael had always thought success came from work and money, but now he saw that real success was happening right in his living room. It was in every step Matthew took, in every smile that followed a hard exercise. Michael stood up and told Sarah he would be there every morning from now on. No more excuses, no more missing out. Sarah smiled and agreed. As Matthew rested, the room felt different. Not perfect, but new. It was the start of something better for all of them. Later that week, after a few consistent mornings of helping with Matthew's therapy routine, Michael asked Sarah if she had a moment to talk in private. She looked a bit nervous, unsure of what it might be about, but agreed. He led her to his home office and closed the door behind them. Michael sat down across from her and began the conversation in a calm and serious tone. He said he had been observing the work she'd been doing with Matthew every morning, the way she handled the exercises, how she motivated the boy, and how she adjusted the routine when something didn't work. He told her he was deeply impressed. He admitted he hadn't realized before how much of an impact she was having on his son's life. Then, without wasting more time, he said he had a proposal. Sarah blinked, surprised. Michael continued. He wanted her to become Matthew's official therapeutic companion. He wanted her to stop doing the housework and instead focus all her time on supporting Matthew's physical development. It was a serious shift. Sarah didn't answer right away. She looked confused. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. Michael saw her reaction and clarified everything. He said he would take care of hiring another person to handle the household chores so she could give her full attention to Matthew. He also said he would increase her salary, recognizing the level of responsibility and importance this new role would have. But there was more. Michael explained that he would pay for her to take a certified physical therapy course. He said she already had the practical experience, but with training, she could become even more effective. He made it clear that this was not just a favor. He saw real potential in her. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand for a second, holding back tears. No one had ever offered her anything like that before. Most of her life had been about doing what was necessary to survive, not being recognized for her skills. Now someone was offering her a future, a career path. She finally found her voice and thanked Michael. Her eyes were still wet, but she was smiling. She told him she would accept the proposal. She said she had never imagined something like this happening. It wasn't just about the money or the title. It was about being seen, being trusted, and given a chance to grow. She promised to continue taking care of Matthew with the same dedication and love as before. Nothing would change in her heart. Only now she would be more prepared, more supported, and more focused. Michael nodded, relieved and happy to hear her response. He told her he would handle all the logistics, finding a new housekeeper, enrolling her in an online course with a flexible schedule, and setting up regular check-ins to track Matthew's progress together. Sarah said she was ready to study hard and do her best. That conversation marked a turning point for both of them. Sarah left the office with a new sense of purpose, and Michael felt that he had made the right decision. The next few days brought a noticeable change in the household. The new housekeeper, Mariana, started work and quickly got used to the routine. She was polite, focused, and efficient, allowing Sarah to step away from her previous duties without worrying about the house falling apart. Sarah began spending more time with Matthew, not just during exercises, but also during his playtime, meals, and even reading together in the afternoon. Michael joined the morning therapy sessions as promised. He didn't just sit and watch anymore. He helped hold Matthew steady during balance exercises, assisted in counting reps, and asked Sarah questions about what each movement was meant to improve. Sarah explained everything clearly, sometimes even showing examples. Michael took mental notes. Their teamwork grew stronger. Matthew, feeling all this support around him, became more confident. His walking got better. He smiled more often. He laughed during exercises instead of getting frustrated. The house had a different energy now. It was calmer, more focused, and more hopeful. Each day felt like it had a real purpose. Grace, however, remained mostly distant during this shift. She watched everything quietly from the sidelines. She wasn't rude, but she also didn't fully participate. She noticed Michael waking up earlier, talking more to Matthew, and spending less time buried in his phone or work emails. At first, she thought it was temporary. Maybe he was trying to make up for something. But as the days passed, she saw that it wasn't a phase. He was genuinely changing. He was more patient, more present, and more willing to listen. Grace didn't say anything directly, but she noticed. One evening, she saw Michael helping Matthew tie his shoes, something she had always assumed the nanny or Sarah would do. She stood by the door quietly and watched. She remembered how disconnected they all had been, and now things were starting to feel different. Sarah still made her uncomfortable, not because of anything she did, but because of how naturally she had filled a role Grace herself had neglected. Still, she couldn't deny the positive results that were now visible. Michael continued supporting Sarah's progress as well. He checked in with her often, asking how the course was going and offering help whenever she seemed stuck with something. Sarah stayed up late at night studying, reviewing anatomy basics, learning physical therapy techniques, and attending video classes. She took it seriously. She wanted to earn the trust that had been placed in her. In the mornings, she applied what she learned immediately, adjusting Matthew's exercises slightly or adding new ones. The boy responded well. His coordination improved, and he started to enjoy challenging himself. Sarah made learning fun, and Michael added his own playful encouragement during the sessions. It became a true team effort where everyone had a role. Grace, while still distant, began staying longer in the room during sessions. She didn't say much, but she was observing more. One time, she even brought a towel and water for Matthew. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Things were changing slowly. The home that once felt cold and distant now had moments of connection. Sarah's new role brought confidence to her life. She felt respected, motivated, and part of something bigger than herself. Michael, now more involved as a father, was discovering how much he had missed. He still had a lot to learn, but he was willing to change, and that made all the difference. Grace remained a question mark in this new chapter, but her silence was no longer rejection. It felt like she was just trying to understand where she belonged in all of it. Matthew's progress became the center of everything. Standing longer, walking with more control, and even starting to go short distances without support. Every little win brought smiles, sometimes even tears. At the end of each morning, they often sat around the kitchen table, talking or laughing about something funny Matthew said. Those simple moments were becoming normal. The home routine had changed completely, and it all started with one proposal, a conversation that gave Sarah the chance to grow and gave Michael the opportunity to rebuild his role as a father. It was a regular morning in the Johnson house, and everyone was gathered in the living room for Matthew's therapy routine. Sarah was preparing the mat on the floor, laying out a small towel, and setting up the stopwatch. Michael sat on the couch, watching with his usual focus. Matthew, now much more confident, adjusted his balance on the edge of a chair and waited for Sarah's signal. She smiled and said, "Ready when you are." Matthew nodded, then stood up without help. Slowly and carefully, he began walking forward. One step, then another, and another. Michael leaned forward, eyes wide. Sarah counted the steps softly, encouraging him. That's 3, 4. Keep going. Matthew kept moving, his legs shaky but steady. When he reached his 8th step, he paused and looked back with a huge smile. Sarah clapped her hands, tears forming in her eyes. Michael stood up and hugged his son proudly. "You did it, buddy," he said. It was a big moment. Everyone in the room knew it. Matthew had just walked 8 steps completely on his own. Later that same day, Grace invited an old friend over for lunch. Her name was Patricia, and she was known for her sharp opinions and high society attitude. As soon as she arrived, she began making small, judgmental comments about the decor, the neighborhood, and even the food. Sarah, always polite, offered her water and then went back to helping Matthew with some stretches in the corner of the living room. Patricia glanced at them and frowned. "Isn't that your maid?" she asked Grace. "She's acting like a physical therapist or something." Grace, a bit uncomfortable, didn't answer right away. Patricia continued louder this time. "That girl is overstepping. I mean, seriously, this isn't her place. There should be limits." Sarah heard everything. She tried to ignore it, focusing on Matthew, but the boy looked up at her and noticed the way her face had changed. Matthew stood up, still a little shaky, and turned toward Patricia. He said, loud and clear, "She helps me walk. She's not just a maid. She's my friend." Michael, who had just entered from the kitchen, heard his son's voice and quickly realized something was wrong. He asked what had happened, and Sarah, trying to stay calm, quietly told him. Matthew repeated what Patricia had said. Michael didn't hide his anger. He walked over to Patricia and said, "We don't speak to people like that in this house." Patricia looked shocked. "I didn't mean to offend anyone," she muttered, trying to defend herself. But Michael didn't back down. He turned to Grace and asked her directly, "Are you okay with this? Someone insulting Sarah in our home?" Grace, clearly uncomfortable, looked down for a second, then said, "No, it's not okay." Patricia tried to change the subject, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Michael made it clear that anyone who disrespected Sarah would not be welcome in their home again. Sarah stood silently in the corner, still holding back tears. For the first time, she saw Michael stand up for her in front of others, without hesitation. After Patricia left, Grace approached Sarah in the kitchen. She looked serious, not defensive. "I'm sorry," she said. "What she said was wrong, and I should have said something sooner." Sarah nodded, not fully trusting the moment, but appreciating the apology. Grace continued, "I'm going to call her and tell her she's not welcome here anymore. I should have done it right away." Sarah thanked her. It wasn't easy for her to accept apologies, especially when they came late. But this one felt necessary. That evening, Michael sat down with Grace and told her that this couldn't happen again. "Sarah is part of this family now," he said. "She's not just someone we hire. She's helping raise our son. She's helping him walk. We owe her respect, not judgment." Grace agreed. For the first time, they were on the same page about Sarah. The air in the house felt different that night, not just because of the apology, but because of the clear boundaries that had been set. Sarah's place in the home was no longer a silent truth. It was spoken out loud. In the days that followed, Sarah felt the change. Grace became more polite, more respectful. She started asking Sarah for her input during family meals or when organizing the weekly schedule. She even offered to help one morning during Matthew's therapy session, handing Sarah a towel and sitting nearby. It was a small gesture, but Sarah noticed. Michael stayed consistent in his support. He thanked Sarah often, asked about her progress in her course, and encouraged her to take breaks when needed. Matthew, now fully aware of what had happened, became even more protective of Sarah. If anyone joked or asked questions about her role, he was quick to explain who she was and what she meant to him. The house began to feel more united, more open. Mariana, the new housekeeper, also became part of this positive shift. She treated Sarah with respect and always spoke to her as a colleague, not as someone beneath her. The overall energy in the house changed. It was a space where everyone mattered, no matter their background. The conflict with Patricia became a turning point for the Johnson family. It forced them to see what kind of home they wanted to have. Michael and Grace talked more openly about values, about how they had grown up, and what they wanted to teach their son. Sarah, once quiet and unsure of her place, now walked through the house with more confidence. She had a role, a voice, and the family's full support. Matthew's progress didn't slow down. If anything, he became more motivated. He asked Sarah for extra exercises, tried harder during his sessions, and proudly counted how many steps he could take each week. The bond between him, Michael, and Sarah became stronger than ever. Grace still had her moments of silence, but she was changing. Slowly, but genuinely. The house no longer accepted superiority, prejudice, or cold behavior. It was now a place of encouragement and respect. And it all became clear that day, when Matthew walked 8 steps and when Sarah was finally defended as more than just help. She was family. One afternoon, Sarah received a phone call that left her silent for a few minutes after she hung up. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor and thinking. A wealthy family from another part of the city had contacted her after hearing about her work with Matthew. They had a child with similar needs and were looking for someone experienced, caring, and committed. The offer was almost too good to believe. They were offering double the salary she currently received, along with full benefits, including private health care and a small apartment closer to their home. They also promised job security and additional support for her mother and brother. It was everything Sarah had always hoped for: stability, financial security, and peace of mind for her family. But at the same time, she felt something tighten in her chest. Accepting the offer would mean leaving Matthew, leaving the house where she had built so many important connections, and walking away from something that had grown far beyond just a job. She didn't know what to do. The next morning, Sarah asked Michael if they could talk privately. They sat at the dining table after breakfast, while Matthew was in the living room, watching cartoons. Sarah took a deep breath and told him about the offer. She explained everything: the salary, the benefits, the home for her mother and brother. Michael listened carefully, not interrupting. She made it clear that she hadn't accepted it yet, but she was truly torn. "It's a chance to take better care of my family," she said, "but I feel like I'd be walking away from something important here." Michael looked at her with understanding. He thanked her for being honest and said he appreciated her coming to him before making a decision. Then he asked her a simple question. If the money wasn't part of it, what would you choose? Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked down, then slowly said, "I'd stay. Because I care about Matthew, and about all of you." Her voice was soft but steady. She had said what she really felt. Michael stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside for a few seconds. Then he turned back to Sarah and sat down again. "I can't match everything they're offering," he began, "but I can try." He told her that he would double her salary, just like the other family had offered. He also said he would include a health plan that covered her, her mother, and her brother. "You've done more for us than we could ever measure," he said. "You're not just helping Matthew walk, you're helping this family grow stronger." Sarah's eyes started to fill with tears. She didn't expect him to respond like that. She thought he would understand if she left, maybe even wish her well. But instead, he was fighting to keep her, not just with money, but with genuine respect and gratitude. "I can't force you to stay," Michael added, "but I want you to know how much we value you." Sarah nodded slowly, still emotional. She asked for a day to think about it, and Michael said he would support whatever choice she made. Sarah didn't sleep much that night. She kept going over everything in her mind. The new job could change her family's life, but the thought of leaving Matthew behind was painful. She remembered his first steps, his excitement during exercises, and the way he looked at her every morning, full of trust. She also remembered the time he defended her in front of that rude guest, and how Michael and Grace stood by her afterward. This wasn't just a job anymore. These people had become her second family. The next morning, Sarah walked into the living room where Matthew was playing with his toy blocks. She sat next to him and asked, "What would you say if I had to go work somewhere else?" Matthew froze. He looked up at her, clearly confused. "Why?" he asked. She explained briefly, not wanting to scare him. "Someone asked me to work for them. They said they'd pay more." Matthew was quiet for a few seconds. Then he hugged her tightly and said, "But I still need you. I haven't finished learning how to walk good." She realized that while money could buy stability, it couldn't replace the emotional connection she had with Matthew. She went to Michael and gave her answer. "I'm staying," she said simply. Michael smiled and thanked her. "Are you sure?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "I'm sure. This is where I'm supposed to be." He assured her again that the new salary and health plan would start right away, and that if she ever needed anything else, she could come to him directly. When Grace found out, she quietly pulled Sarah aside and said, "I'm glad you're staying." Really? It wasn't much, but for Grace, it was a big step. That evening, they all sat together during dinner, something that had become more regular lately. Matthew was happier than usual. He kept talking about how he wanted to practice standing longer the next morning and told Sarah he had made her a drawing. The family laughed and shared stories while eating, something they rarely did before. Things had changed, and for the better. Sarah's decision to stay wasn't just important for Matthew's progress. It meant something deeper for the whole family. Michael felt proud, not only for being able to offer her the support she deserved, but also for realizing how much she meant to them. Grace, who had once kept her distance, now accepted Sarah's presence with gratitude. Matthew, of course, felt the most relief. Knowing she would still be there to guide him gave him confidence. The bond they shared was strong and full of trust. Sarah continued her studies in physical therapy, applying what she learned every day. The progress didn't slow down. Matthew kept improving step by step, and Sarah remained at his side. The Johnson household now felt more like a true team, where respect and love had replaced cold formality. Everyone had a role, and everyone mattered. Sarah's choice made one thing clear. She wasn't just an employee, she was a pillar of that home. And with her staying, the family's foundation grew even stronger, grounded in commitment, care, and mutual respect. It was a bright morning, and Sarah had just finished setting up the small cones in the garden for Matthew's usual walking exercises. Michael was already outside, seated on the wooden bench with a cup of coffee, watching quietly as he always did these days. Grace stood nearby, holding a towel and water bottle. Her presence during the sessions had become more frequent in the past weeks. Matthew stepped onto the grass with his usual energy. He had been walking longer distances and standing more firmly without help. Sarah gave him a few warm-up stretches and then positioned him at the starting point of the garden path. "Let's walk to the third cone today, all right?" she said, smiling. Matthew nodded. He took a deep breath and started walking slowly but steadily. As he reached the second cone, something changed. Instead of stopping, he leaned forward and began moving faster. His steps turned into a short jog. For the first time ever, Matthew ran. It wasn't far, maybe 6 meters, but it was real. Sarah gasped. Michael stood up in shock. Grace dropped the towel, frozen in place. Everyone stayed silent for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Sarah walked slowly toward Matthew, who had stopped near the last cone with a huge grin on his face. "Did you see that?" he asked, almost shouting. Michael walked over and picked him up, spinning him around gently. "You ran," he said, still stunned. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. She wiped her eyes and crouched next to them. "You ran, Matthew. You really did it." Grace walked over, still processing what she had seen. She knelt next to her son and kissed his forehead. "You're amazing," she whispered. It wasn't just a physical victory. It was the moment that showed everything they had done so far. The early mornings, the hard work, the emotional ups and downs had been worth it. Matthew running was more than just a step forward in therapy. It was proof that love, patience, and consistent care had made real change. This simple act, running just a few meters, brought all three of them closer than ever before. As they sat on the grass, recovering from the excitement, Grace stayed quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Michael and said, "Can we talk?" He nodded. Sarah took Matthew inside for a snack, giving them space. Grace looked directly at her husband and said, "A few months ago, I was thinking about leaving." Michael didn't respond right away. He just listened. Grace continued, "I felt like I didn't know who you were anymore. You were always working, barely home, and when you were here, you were distant, cold." Michael lowered his eyes, knowing she was right. "But now," she added, "I see something different. I see a man who wakes up early to help our son, who defends the people in this house, who cares. I didn't think you could change, but you did." Her voice cracked a little and she paused. "I see a father, a husband, and I don't want to leave anymore." Michael reached for her hand. It was the first real connection they had shared in a long time. For once, there were no arguments, just truth. Michael held Grace's hand tightly and spoke softly. "I know I failed before. I thought I was doing what was right by focusing on work and providing everything we needed. But I see now that I was missing the most important parts." Grace nodded. "You were," she said, but her voice wasn't harsh. It was honest. He continued, "Matthew taught me a lot, but so did Sarah. Watching her every day reminded me what consistency and care really look like." They sat for a few minutes in silence. There was no need to rush the moment. When Sarah returned with Matthew, he was carrying a drawing he made of the three of them standing in the garden. In the center of the drawing, Sarah was holding Matthew's hand. It wasn't just a child's drawing, it was a reflection of how he saw his world. Michael and Grace looked at each other and smiled. Without needing to say it out loud, they both understood. Their family had changed completely. And at the center of that change was someone they never expected, Sarah. The rest of the day was filled with small moments that held more meaning than usual. Michael played with Matthew after lunch, helping him build a small wooden puzzle. Grace joined in later, sitting on the floor with them, laughing when Matthew got frustrated over a missing piece. Sarah stayed nearby, organizing therapy notes and updating Matthew's progress chart. She didn't speak much, but she observed everything. Her heart was full. Not because she was the center of attention, but because she could see how much the family had grown. Later, when the sun began to set, Grace quietly pulled Sarah aside. She looked nervous, but then she said, "Thank you for staying and for changing our lives." Sarah was surprised. Grace had thanked her before, but this time felt different. It felt complete. Sarah smiled and replied, "Matthew changed me too. We're all learning from each other." Grace nodded. In that moment, something between them shifted. Respect had replaced discomfort. Grace no longer saw Sarah as just help. She saw her as someone who made the impossible happen. That night the house felt different, not because of anything loud or obvious, but because everyone felt closer. Michael and Grace talked after putting Matthew to bed, planning together instead of separately. Sarah spent the evening reviewing her therapy coursework, knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Matthew fell asleep, holding the drawing he had made, resting with a calm face. He had reached a big milestone that day, but it wasn't just his progress that mattered. It was how that moment brought the entire family together. The garden, once just a space for walking practice, had become the place where everything changed, a place of honesty, of unity, and of healing. The run, just a few meters long, had done what months of therapy, tension, and conflict hadn't managed to do. It restored the heart of the family. And at the center of that miracle was Sarah. She was no longer just an important part of the family. She was now someone they could never replace. The Johnsons had finally found their way back to each other. The day of Matthew's school graduation had finally arrived. The Johnson family woke up early, full of nerves and excitement. Grace helped Matthew get dressed in his little suit, while Sarah carefully fixed his hair. Michael waited downstairs, checking the time every few minutes and making sure the car was ready. The entire family was going to the event together, and this time things felt different. There was no tension, no rush, just quiet happiness. They all knew how much this day meant, especially for Matthew. He had been practicing for weeks, preparing for a moment that not even doctors believed would happen this soon. On the way to the school, Sarah sat in the back seat next to Matthew, holding his hand gently. She whispered, "You've got this," and he smiled confidently. When they arrived, the school's small auditorium was already full of parents, teachers, and classmates. Everyone waited for the ceremony to begin, but no one in that crowd knew what Matthew had planned. What was about to happen would surprise and move everyone sitting in that room. The ceremony began with short speeches from teachers and the school director. Names were called one by one as students received their certificates. Michael recorded everything on his phone, not wanting to miss a second. Grace watched quietly, her hands tightly clasped together. Sarah stood behind them, proud but trying to stay calm. Then came the moment they had all been waiting for. The speaker announced, "And now, let's welcome Matthew Johnson to the stage." There was a small pause as everyone looked toward the side of the stage. And then, to the shock of many, Matthew walked out, not with crutches, not with assistance, but completely on his own. His steps were steady, his shoulders upright, and his eyes shining with confidence. There was a moment of silence, and then loud applause erupted across the room. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, holding back tears. Michael stood up. Grace had tears streaming down her face. Matthew reached the center of the stage, turned to face the audience, and raised the microphone to speak. His voice was clear, though a little shaky from emotion. "Today, I want to thank 3 people," he began. "My dad, for always believing I could do more. My mom, for never giving up on me. And my tia Sarah for being there every single day." The crowd clapped again. Sarah froze when she heard the word tia. It was the first time he had called her that in public. Matthew continued, "They helped me stand, walk, and now I can even run." With that, he stepped back, took a few quick breaths, and ran across the stage from one end to the other. Not a long run, but strong, fast, and full of balance. Everyone stood up and cheered loudly. Some parents cried. Others clapped wildly. Teachers looked at each other in disbelief. It wasn't just a child running, it was the clear result of something special. Michael joined Matthew on stage and pulled him into a hug. Then he turned to the crowd and asked for a moment. Holding the microphone, he had something important to say. Michael looked out at the crowd and took a deep breath. "Many of you know me as someone who's always working, always busy. But today, I need to say something personal." The room got quiet. What you saw here wasn't a miracle. It was the result of love, hard work, and one incredible woman who changed our lives. He turned and motioned for Sarah to come forward. She hesitated, but the crowd began clapping and cheering her name. Slowly, she walked onto the stage. Michael continued, "Sarah started as an employee in our house, but she became much more. She became family. And I want everyone to know that from today on, Sarah is no longer just someone who works for us. She's our sister, our hero, and someone who will always be part of this family." The audience applauded again, louder than before. Sarah stood next to Matthew, speechless. Grace stepped up too, nodding in agreement. In that moment, the lines between roles disappeared. What was once a job had become a bond stronger than any contract. After the ceremony, many parents came up to Michael and Sarah. They asked questions. How did the therapy work? What kind of exercises did she do? Was there a program they could follow? Some even asked if Sarah would be willing to help their children. Sarah answered politely, though she wasn't used to being the center of attention. Michael listened carefully to each question, his mind already spinning with ideas. On the drive home, he turned to Sarah and said, "Have you ever thought about starting something of your own? Like a therapy center?" Sarah looked surprised. "Me?" she asked. Michael nodded. "Why not? You have the skills, you've proven it, and today everyone saw it too." Sarah didn't respond right away, but her expression said she was thinking seriously about it. The idea was new, but it made sense. What had started with Matthew could grow into something bigger, something that could help more families. By the time they arrived home, the topic was still on their minds. A seed had been planted, and it was full of potential. Over the next few days, news about Matthew's presentation spread across the community. Parents began talking, teachers shared videos on social media, and Sarah's name came up in every conversation. Some called it a miracle, but those closest to the family knew it was the result of daily commitment and deep emotional care. Sarah quickly became a symbol of hope, not just for families with children in therapy, but for anyone who believed in second chances, in change, and in people who give without asking for much in return. Matthew was proud of her. He told his friends at school, "My Tia is famous now." Michael began researching how to open a therapy center. Grace, now fully supportive, offered to help organize it. The Johnsons had become something more than just a family in recovery. They were now a family with a mission. Sarah, who once walked quietly through their halls as a housemaid, now walked proudly beside them, recognized, respected, and loved. And it all became official the day Matthew ran across that stage, proving that anything was possible with love, patience, and the right people beside you. 2 years had passed since Matthew had run across the stage at his graduation, and now another big moment was about to happen. A large banner hung above the entrance of a new building that read, "Hope Light Therapy Center." Families gathered outside, taking photos and smiling as they waited for the ribbon-cutting ceremony to begin. Michael stood proudly at the front, holding a microphone. Grace stood beside him with Matthew, now taller, healthier, and full of confidence. Sarah, wearing a simple yet elegant blouse, stood to the side, trying to remain calm, even though this moment meant everything to her. The building was clean and colorful, with bright drawings on the windows, and a welcoming atmosphere that already made people feel safe. Michael began the ceremony with a short speech. He talked about how it all started with one child, one struggle, and one woman who refused to give up. Then he called Sarah forward and handed her the scissors. As she cut the ribbon, applause broke out. The Luz de Esperanza Center was officially open, and Sarah was now its therapy director. Inside the building, visitors explored the rooms filled with therapy equipment, learning materials, and open spaces for children to move freely. Every part of the center was designed to be welcoming and inclusive. There were physical therapy stations, sensory rooms, private counseling areas, and even a small garden where kids could relax. Sarah gave a tour to a few parents, explaining how each activity would support the children's development. She didn't use complicated terms. She spoke with care, clearly showing that she understood both the physical and emotional sides of recovery. Many of the parents already knew her story and respected her deeply. Some even signed up for evaluations that same day. Matthew, who had recovered more than anyone thought possible, was introduced during the opening as the official symbol of the center's mission. He walked to the front of the room without any help, looked at the children in the crowd and said, "I used to need help to walk. Now I want to help others." The audience clapped again, many of them moved by his words. Michael had played a big role in making this dream a reality. He had slowly shifted the direction of his company, investing part of its profits into social initiatives, with the therapy center being the most important one. His priorities had changed completely over the last few years. Money and status no longer defined success for him. Impact did. He still managed his business, but with a different goal: to support ideas that created real change. He hired specialists to support Sarah's work, but always made it clear that she was the leader. Her experience, dedication, and instinct had guided Matthew's transformation, and now she was guiding others too. Grace helped with administrative tasks and even started organizing monthly family events at the center to bring people together. The Johnson family was now fully connected to the community, offering not just services, but support, hope, and understanding. What had started as a personal recovery journey had now expanded to dozens of children and their families, all thanks to one decision: to trust and value the right person. One afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the center. Michael recognized the man who stepped out, Richard Thompson, a business rival he hadn't seen in years. Richard's grandson had recently started therapy at Luz de Esperanza, and the results had been impressive. Sarah had been working directly with the boy, who struggled with motor coordination and anxiety. In just a few months, his posture improved, his movements became more stable, and most importantly, his confidence grew. Richard walked through the front doors with a serious expression, but it was clear he wasn't there to argue. He asked for Sarah, and then, in front of Michael, said something unexpected. "I owe you an apology. Years ago, I tried to hire you away, thinking you were just a talented helper. But I see now you're much more than that. You're a leader." Sarah, surprised but calm, thanked him. Michael nodded, accepting the apology as well. There was no bitterness. The work spoke for itself. Richard shook their hands, left a donation for the center, and walked away quietly, his pride replaced with real respect. After Richard left, Michael stood outside the building for a moment, looking up at the sign again. He thought about everything that had happened, the early days with Matthew, the uncertainty, the turning points, the conflicts, and all the decisions that had shaped their lives. He realized that none of it would have happened if he hadn't chosen to listen to Sarah, to support her, and most importantly, to believe in her. If he had treated her like just another employee, she probably would have left for a better-paying job. If he had ignored her dedication, Matthew might not be where he was now. The thought made him feel both proud and a little emotional. He had grown, and so had his understanding of what truly mattered. The therapy center wasn't just a new business. It was a living reminder that when people are supported, miracles happen. Michael turned to go back inside, where Sarah was helping a new child get started on a balance activity. She looked at ease, exactly where she belonged, doing what she was meant to do. Inside the center, the atmosphere was full of life. Children moved from station to station, guided by trained professionals under Sarah's leadership. Parents waited in the reception area, many of them talking about the improvements they were already seeing in their kids. Sarah checked her clipboard and offered a few tips to a therapist while also keeping an eye on Matthew, who was helping another boy try the same exercises he once struggled with. The staff respected Sarah not just for her knowledge, but for her attitude, firm, kind, and always present. She didn't rush anyone, didn't overpromise, but made sure every child felt seen and supported. Her work had become a model for others, and now therapists from other cities were asking to train under her. Grace handled incoming calls, and Michael oversaw partnerships and funding. Everything ran smoothly, and the results were visible. Luz de Esperanza wasn't just a therapy center. It was proof that a long-term vision rooted in care and consistency could change lives. And at the center of it all stood Sarah, the woman who once entered their home as a maid, and now stood as a leader of a movement. Years had passed, but the garden behind the Johnson house still looked the same path of stones curved through the green grass, the same spot near the back wall where Matthew used to struggle to walk, now served as a quiet place to sit and think. Michael and Matthew were there together, seated on a wooden bench, enjoying the calm afternoon. Matthew, now a young adult, had grown tall and strong, but he still carried the softness in his eyes that had always been part of him. Michael, with more grey in his hair and a slower pace in his movements, looked at his son with pride. "Do you remember," Michael asked, "the day I came home early and saw you in the living room with Sarah?" Matthew smiled and nodded. "Of course I do. I was trying to clean the floor with her," Michael chuckled. "You were using one hand to wipe the floor and the other to hold your crutch." They both laughed, but then Matthew's voice turned more serious. "That was the first time I ever felt important." "Important," he repeated. Matthew nodded slowly. "Yeah, not because someone felt sorry for me, but because someone believed I could help, that I could do something useful. Sarah never treated me like I was broken. That day changed everything." Michael stayed quiet, thinking back to that exact moment. He remembered how it had hit him like a wall. The image of his son working hard, smiling, trying. It was the first time he truly saw the strength inside the boy. And next to him was Sarah, calm and focused, treating the moment like it was completely normal. But it hadn't been normal for Michael. It had opened his eyes. "That day changed me too," he finally said. "It was the start of everything. Our healing, our reconnection, your progress. All of it started right there." They sat in silence again for a moment, each one lost in the memory. Then the sound of the gate opening broke their thoughts. Sarah had just arrived home from the therapy center. Sarah walked toward them with a smile on her face. She looked a little tired, her bag hanging over one shoulder, but there was joy in her eyes. "Good timing," she said. "I was hoping to catch you two out here." Matthew stood up and hugged her tightly. Michael gave her a quick hug too. "How was your day?" he asked. Sarah sat on the bench beside them and let out a small sigh. "Busy," she replied, "but something beautiful happened today. A little girl who had never walked before took her first steps with me. Her parents were crying. It reminded me of you, Matthew." Matthew smiled. "You're still out there doing miracles." Sarah shook her head. "Not miracles, just love, patience, and hard work. The same things we always believed in." Michael looked at both of them and felt his chest grow warm. There were no cameras around, no audience, just the three of them sitting together, recognizing how far they had come. The moment felt simple, but it meant everything. These were the people who had rebuilt each other. Sarah leaned back slightly, looking at the garden, and said, "This is where it all started, right?" Matthew nodded. "Yeah, right here." She smiled. "It's strange. Sometimes we don't realize we're changing someone's life while it's happening. We just do what we can." Michael agreed. But looking back, it's easy to see that everything shifted here. The garden, once just a backyard, had become a symbol of everything they had overcome. Fear, distance, and hopelessness. And now it was a place full of memory, strength, and connection. Sarah shared a few more stories about the children she had helped recently. Some were walking, others were still trying, but all of them were getting better. And that's what mattered. "You've helped so many kids," Matthew said. "But you'll always be my first coach." Sarah smiled and reached over to squeeze his hand. "And you'll always be my first fighter." They laughed again. The bond between them was unbreakable, not just because of the therapy, but because of the years they had spent growing, struggling, and never giving up on each other. As the sun began to go down, the garden grew quiet again. The three of them stayed seated, not feeling the need to go inside just yet. They enjoyed the silence, the fresh air, and the feeling of being whole. Michael looked at Matthew, then at Sarah, and said, I'm grateful every day that you stayed with us. Sarah nodded. I'm grateful too. For this family, for the chance to do something that matters. Matthew looked at them both and spoke with certainty. Our story isn't finished. It's just the beginning. There's so much more to do, so many more people to help. His words weren't said to impress anyone. They came from his heart. And both Michael and Sarah knew he was right. What they had built together had gone beyond the Johnson family. It had spread to other families, other children, and now it was becoming something that would live on. The love that started with one small act, helping a boy clean a floor, had grown into a legacy, a living, growing force that would continue touching lives for years to come. Sarah's name had already become known in their city and beyond. Articles had been written. Families traveled from far away to visit the therapy center. Young therapists asked to train under her. Parents shared stories of their children improving, not just physically, but emotionally. But to Michael and Matthew, she was still just Sarah, the woman who once helped around the house, who became a teacher, a leader, and family. Her impact could now be measured in stories, lives changed, and a center that stood proudly in the community. But none of that mattered more than moments like this, sitting in the garden, talking about the past, believing in the future. The three of them stood up and headed toward the house. Before going inside, Matthew turned back for one last look at the spot where it all began. This place is part of us now, he said. Sarah and Michael both nodded. And as the door closed behind them, one thing was clear. Sarah's legacy wasn't just something to remember. It was still growing. And the love that built it would keep guiding them forward, always. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.